So let's get started, everybody. So kia ora, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all of our attendees who are joining throughout the world and e te ora. My name is Ryan Gammon, and I'm one of the international managers here at New Zealand's leading research-led university, the University of Auckland. Thank you so much for joining us today at our final webinar of the Shaping the Future webinar series at the University of Auckland. Our panel discussion today will be focusing on shaping the future through engineering, design, and business innovation. Now, we're extremely lucky to be joined by an exemplar set of panelists representing the Faculty of Engineering, the School of Design, and the Business School. So a very warm welcome to our panelists, who I will be introducing later on in today's session. Now, today's session will be structured as follows. We will begin with a short introduction and overview of New Zealand's #1 university, the University of Auckland, which will be followed by our panelists providing an introduction on their research, teaching, and interests. This will then be followed by a set of questions for each of our panelists, finishing up with a Q&A section for our attendees to pose those questions to our panelists and join in on the fascinating discussion. Now, before we get started, I do just want to mention a few housekeeping rules on how today's session will go forward. So I know lots of you will have lots of questions as we kick off the discussion, but what I would ask you to do is please just wait right until the end of the today's session, where we do have a Q&A section. And also after today's session, we will be emailing you with a recording of today's webinar, and we will also be including a few really useful links that may have been mentioned throughout the discussion today. Now, what I'll do is I'm just going to kick off our slides, and just to give you a nice overview of the University of Auckland, and hopefully some of you may know where we are in Aotearoa in New Zealand. So just a few quick facts about the University of Auckland. So we are New Zealand's largest university. We have around 42,000 students alongside 5,000 staff. So extremely large and comprehensive university located right in the heart of the city of Auckland, or the city of sails, if you know us well. Now, we're not only New Zealand's leading university, we're also ranked #1 in New Zealand, but we're also ranked 81st in the world globally via the QS World Rankings, which we're extremely proud of. And not only that, in the Time Higher Education Rankings, we're also ranked in the top 150 in the world. And we have around 16 different subject areas which are ranked in the top 50. So that's absolutely fantastic. Now, we're also home to around or over 8,000 international students from over 120 different countries, which really do represent the vibrancy and diversity here in the city of Auckland. So we're really, really proud, and we celebrate all of our international students who do join us at this wonderful institution. Now, I also just want to highlight that we are ranked #1 in New Zealand for graduate employability, and that really does just speak volumes about our alumni and about the fantastic employment opportunities our students gain post-completion of their program with us. Now, as I said, we're an extremely large institution here in the heart of the city of Auckland, and we are home to 8 faculties and an abundance of campuses in and around Auckland, and that's where these faculties are based. So we have arts, and some of the fantastic subjects in arts are politics, policy, media, global studies, and so forth. We're also home to the #1 business school in New Zealand, and again, that's in accounting, finance, management, international business, global management, and innovation. And I'm sure Christine will be talking about some of that innovation and entrepreneurship later on as well. We're also home to the Faculty of Creative Arts and Industry, so architecture, urban planning, fine arts, music, and design. And again, I'm sure Carla will be talking about design later on. We're also home to education and social work, engineering, so civil, structural, mechanical. And again, we also have electrical and electronics, computer systems, software engineering, and robotics. And Bruce will be touching on that later on as well. We also have a fantastic law faculty, #1 in New Zealand, and home to a medical health and sciences faculty, again, up in Grafton. And then we have our largest faculty, which is the Faculty of Science as well. What I would encourage you all to do after today's session, if you are interested in some of these fascinating subjects, please do go onto the University of Auckland website after today, have a look around on there, and you'll really get a great indication about some of the wonderful programs we do have on offer. Now, I also just want to take this opportunity just to highlight how globalized as a university we are and all of our international links. So we are part of the APRU, also the Universitas 21, as well as the World University Network as well. So we have over 180 different partners in around 45 countries. So we also have a fantastic opportunity for students to go on exchange and study abroad as part of their undergraduate degree, which I highly recommend if you do come and study with us as well. Now, one of the final things I do want to mention about the University of Auckland, and it's probably most important, particularly for today's session, is for a second year running, the University of Auckland has been ranked #1 in the world in the Times Higher Education Global Impact Rankings for universities. And we're extremely proud of that accolade. So not only were we ranked #1 in 2019, but we're also ranked #1 again in 2020. And as you can see on that slide, you can see all of the sustainable development goals, which are set by the United Nations. So we're extremely proud of that. We are ranked overall #1. And again, you know, probably after today's discussion, you'll see the reasons why. Now, I do just want to take this opportunity because, as I said, to introduce our exemplar panelists who are so lucky to be joining us from engineering, design and the business school. So I'm going to introduce Professor Bruce McDonald. So Bruce is a professor at the Faculty of Engineering in the Electrical and Electronic Computer Systems and Software Engineering Department. And Bruce's long-term goal is to design intelligent robotic assistants that improve the quality of people's lives. And his primary research interests are in human robotic interaction and robot programming systems in applications such as healthcare and agriculture. He is currently the director of the department's robotics group, and he's also leader of the multidisciplinary Centre for Automation Robotics Engineering Science Robotics team at the University of Auckland. So thank you for joining us, Bruce. We also have lecturer Carla Amaral, who is part of the Faculty of Creative Arts and Industry in the School of Design. And Carla is a designer, researcher, and educator, and she is interested in the areas of transformative service design, health and well-being, and she's currently involved in research focusing on how digital platforms can empower people with physical disabilities in their mobility experiences. So a massive warm welcome to you, Carla. And we also have Associate Professor Christine Woods from the #1 Business School in New Zealand in entrepreneurship and innovation. And Christine Woods is a specialist in entrepreneurship and innovation in the business school and currently teaches entrepreneurship at undergraduate and postgraduate level. She's also a research area of in family businesses, small and medium-sized businesses and growth, social entrepreneurship, Maori entrepreneurship, and entrepreneurial behavior. So a massive warm welcome to you, Christine. It's great to have you here. Now, I'm going to hand over to our first panelist, which is Professor Bruce McDonald, and over to you, Bruce.
Great, thank you, Ryan, and welcome everybody to the webinar today. Thank you for coming along. So I'm just going to talk a little bit about our robotics work. I guess everybody's dreamed of a future of robots, and some of the dreams you can see there on the screen. Okay, next slide.
Thanks, Bruce.
So as Ryan said, our goal is to make robot technologies that improve well-being for everybody in our whole society, and we have a focus on impact. So that is making things actually happen, you know, from the research we do in the real world that actually do make things better for people on a large scale. And overall, we try to include everybody who's related to the research, all the people who might use our work, and all the people who, you know, there might be an effect on it and could get benefits from it. And that helps us design the research and make it work for everybody. Thank you. So as Ryan said, our group is called CARES, the Centre for Automation and Robotic Engineering Science. And there's our goal again. And we have a number of work streams, mainly about making robot devices and software for robots. And then we focus on the healthcare application area and on agriculture as well, mostly on horticulture, which you'll see soon. And then we need to transfer that technology from the university researchers into businesses that can actually use it for something useful to deliver that well-being for everybody. And one of the focuses we have is about humans and robots working together. From a research point of view, we don't know much about what it's like to have robots everywhere. You don't see them that often. So we're doing a lot of studies about that. Thank you. And so we take a simple approach. We have a lot of co-design with our end users. We generally design what the robot should do by understanding the scenario the robot will be in, the context it will be in, and what people actually need the robot to do, either in healthcare or in farming or whatever application. So we try and bring a lot of different researchers together, and we work with, healthcare experts and engineers, computing people, social scientists, and psychologists to understand the robot, and then various people from industry, government, and commercialization, and looking to see what the future will be like. Thank you. I just want to mention a bit about our healthcare robots in action. This shows one of our healthcare robots interacting with a patient and a researcher. And so we had some government funding and some international funding to develop robots to help older people, to help them live independently alone. And so the robots were reminding them to do their daily activities, answering some of their questions, recording some vital signs, and enabling a human healthcare person to kind of supervise lots of people through the internet with the robot as the delivery device. And we had a lot of robots in rest homes and in older people's homes to understand how that would work and what people thought about it. Thank you. And then on the farming side or agriculture side, we're focused mainly on horticulture. And some of the challenges there are about labour shortages. New Zealand's suffering dramatically at the moment. Not enough people to pick kiwi fruit, not enough people to pick the apple harvest, and not enough people to help with a cherry harvest, and so on. So there's actually quite a lot of jobs in those areas. But we want to create technology that can help farmers automate those tasks and reduce the labour shortages that are happening now, and do it with high quality. So one of our projects that we've finished was a project to make a robot to harvest kiwi fruit. So we worked with a company just out of Auckland, and they already had the first version, and we made subsequent versions and improved the performance of the robot kiwi fruit harvester. So we can harvest most of the kiwi fruit in an orchard now, and then we transferred that technology to the company, and they're working on commercializing it to make kiwi fruit harvesters that can be sold overseas and improve New Zealand's export economy. We also made a robot module that went on the same robot to pollinate kiwi fruit flowers, because kiwi fruit, bees don't really like pollinating kiwi fruit. So there's an opportunity to use automation to improve that. And our current project in horticulture is about helping humans who work in orchards and vineyards to help them make better decisions. It's a government funded project, and it has 6 different research organizations working together. And so we're the lead organization, and the other 5 organizations all have, postdocs and PhD students and undergrad students sometimes, and master students working on different parts of this project. And then we're coordinating it all together to develop technology that will record a lot of data about plants to enable us to manage plants at an orchard at a plant level, and make models, 3D models of the plants, and then understand, for example, the 3 case studies are pruning grapevines, thinning the little fruitlets off apple trees because there's usually too many apples on an apple tree, and harvesting blueberries. So we're working on all of those things so that we can actually help humans make a better job of that task, using augmented reality to tell people, prune here, prune there, pick this, pick that, or whatever task it is people will do. And then the final step is to use robots to automate those tasks, so that a company can have a robot service to provide to all the growers in an area, and that robot can go around and do all those tasks for the growers and save some time and money, and alleviate the labour shortage that growers are facing at the moment.
I think that's your last slide there, Bruce.
That's right.
So thank you so much. So we're going to move on now to Carla, and who's going to be talking about design. So thank you so much, Bruce. So over to you, Carla.
Thank you so much, Brian. Thanks for the introduction, and thanks everyone for being here. Kia ora, my name is Carla, and I'm here representing the School of Design today. And as Brian mentioned earlier, we are part of the Creative Arts and Industries faculty. So if we go to the next slide, here on the screen, you can see what our ideal graduate profile looks like. So basically, in design, we think that everyone that joins a design journey here at the University of Auckland will leave being able to have these skills that you can see on the screen. So for example, we focus on teaching people how to listen hard. We believe that one of the main skills that a designer needs to have is to be able to interview people and understand their needs and find opportunities for positive interventions in their lives. So to be able to understand that, it's really important to analyze forensically. So that's another area that we think designers need to learn and develop. So basically, that means people need to be able to carefully investigate which people, places, and things a project can affect. So slowly, design is moving away from the traditional areas such as graphic and product design and moving into more contemporary areas such as experience design, service design. And I'm going to talk a little bit about that later. And if you have any questions about that, please feel free to ask us in the end. But all those skills that you can see here then commits early, prototypes rapidly, tests authentically, and plans strategically. Those are all skills that designers should have if they want to operate in these contemporary areas. Because basically the idea is not to focus only on the aesthetical part of designing a product or a service or a website or a game, but also understanding the potential impacts that can have in people's lives, communities, nature, and the world as a whole. So if we go to the next slide now, thank you. This is how we teach those skills. So basically, in design, we think about methods, the making, and the studio. So methods are about how and why we design. So basically, it's thinking about how we can turn ideas into something real, and how can we know if something works or doesn't work. So basically, methods and models, they help us understand why and how things work. And the studio is where we bring everything together. So basically, studio practice means people get together to work on a project, to collaborate, and to learn how to work both independently and collaboratively with others, with industries, and with communities. And making is about experimenting with materials, technologies, playing and testing ideas, and learning new technical skills. So design is about learning about technology, learning how to use software, learning how to understand emerging technologies and how emerging technologies can actually influence the world that we live in, but also developing that criticality through models and methods that help us understand potential impacts. So this is how when we think we can future-proof design graduates at the University of Auckland to be able to collaborate and sustainably practice design in the future. Thank you.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Carla.
There's one more slide for design.
There we go. Sorry.
So basically, these are all the areas that we think design can contribute to. So basically, instead of focusing on particular design traditional disciplines, we think that the way the discipline is evolving and the way global challenges are emerging and the way technologies is developing, design will be able to collaborate with people from many other disciplines, and design can be applied into all the contexts that you can see on the screen. So basically, we can think about design for sustainability, design for big data, for change, for well-being, for culture, entertainment, and society as a whole. So it's a little bit about breaking silos and learning about how to be collaborative, strategic, and innovative. And I'm sure Christine will talk a little bit more about innovation soon. So thank you very much for listening to me. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them later on. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Carla. So over to you, Christine.
Kia ora koutou. Welcome, and thank you very much for joining us, and for just, allowing us to give you a small window into what we do here at the University of Auckland. Now, in Ryan's background, you can see Auckland, the larger landmass of Auckland, and you can also see the clock tower, which is part of the university. In this slide, you can see the business school. So this is the University of Auckland Business School, and hopefully one day some of you will be able to come along and actually walk through the doors. So I'm an associate professor there, and my area is entrepreneurship and innovation, specifically in the area of entrepreneurship. And I don't know if anyone is joining us from Malawi, but I spent a little bit of time in Malawi, and I kind of joke that that's where I caught entrepreneurship instead of malaria. And my jokes don't get any better than that. So if we go to the next slide, I'm an academic, but I love this interface between theory and practice. So what do we mean when we talk about innovation and entrepreneurship? So here's a couple of very small definitions that will hopefully help you make sense of these two areas if you don't already know what they are. So what we're talking about with innovation are processes for taking ideas with a degree of novelty and getting them into widely used practice. And what Bruce has provided is a perfect example of innovation in practice. So there's these amazing inventions with robotics, and then the innovation part is how do we get them into practice? So that's a perfect illustration of that. Then sitting alongside that is entrepreneurship. So by entrepreneurship, what we mean is those people, those owners of those businesses, for example, that identified opportunities where the robotics could come into a kiwi fruit orchard and enable that business to grow. So identifying and constructing opportunities, and most importantly, taking action. Because we can all have a whole lot of great ideas, but unless they get put into practice, then what's the point? So what I thought I'd also do is just give you a little overview of what an undergraduate major in innovation and entrepreneurship would look like. So in the next slide, Ryan, what you can see is that we've got stage 2 and stage 3 courses. Now, of course, we do postgraduate, masters, PhDs in innovation and entrepreneurship as well, but this is just to give you a little bit of a sense of what we do. So the entrepreneurial mindset course, this is in our second year. So we have 3-year undergraduate degrees. So this is in your second year. And that entrepreneurial mindset paper is open to anybody across the university to be able to take that alongside those people, those of you that might choose to do a major. Then the second paper is looking at understanding entrepreneurial opportunities. Now we then build on that in stage 3, looking at the ecosystems. What's the ecosystem that exists? So the example with that Bruce gave, for example, if you think about industry, if you think about research, if you think about venture capitalists and private equity that then finance different innovations, that's what we're talking about with the ecosystem. And then the other paper is a project-based paper. So for example, you might get the opportunity to work with one of the kiwi fruit growers, and they have opportunities or problems that they need addressing. And so you as a student get the opportunity to work on real life problems. Because again, remember I talked about this idea of theory and practice. So what are the skills? What are the frameworks that we can provide you with as academics that then you partner with industry to be able to grow sustainable businesses. So that's a really fundamental part of what we endeavour to do in the programs that we offer at an undergraduate and at a postgraduate level. In addition to what we do with the bachelor's and master's programs, we also have a variety of extracurricular activities going on. So in this slide, we talk, and the next slide, sorry, Ryan, we talk about Velocity. So Velocity's been going since 2003, and this is open to any student or staff member to be able to enter into these business planning, idea generation competitions and opportunities. So we have Ignite, which is up to $100,000, and you can enter as a team with your idea. We have Innovation Series, where we have a variety of different speakers that come in and share their real world experience. We have a challenge, 1,000 words for $1,000. And again, that's open to any student across the university. And then we have different programs. So Innovate to Business is a one-day startup program where you can come in and prototype, look at expanding on the idea that you've got and seeing if it is a viable opportunity. So if you want to find out a little bit more about that, then our Centre for Innovation and Entrepreneurship might be a great thing to Google. So really looking forward to your questions, and we'll talk with you again soon.
Thank you so much, Christine. That's absolutely fascinating. Thank you. And I remember going through Velocity at some point as well, and that looks like an awesome program for business school students. So we're now just going to go on to some of our first questions for our panelists. And again, this is really looking at essentially, what do you think are some of the most important global challenges to address in the next 5 to 25 years? Now, I know the immediate concern is really looking at, obviously, we're currently in a pandemic. COVID-19 is really taking up everything right now. But if we look in the next 5 years, maybe post-COVID-19, it'd be great to hear from you, Bruce. What are some of the challenges that you think that we should be addressing in the next 5 to 25 years?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Well, I guess for me, climate change is a big one. And although all of the sustainable development goals, I think, are excellently selected, and we need to think about all of them. The other one is people's, well-being. So, GDP per capita doesn't really cut it anymore. So we should be thinking about how can we make everybody's life, rich and healthy and happy and enjoyable. So the economic part is really important. We really need to have a strong economies in our country so that we can do the things we need to do for climate change and so that people will accept it. And so for me, that's about creating technology that can help people be our society more productive and generate new jobs for people and new things to do.
Fantastic. Yeah, and I can completely concur there. Trying to convince the naysayers about climate change, they're more worried about their pocket as opposed to tackling the issue. So I completely agree with you there. And Carla, for you, in particular with design, what would you say? Would you agree with Bruce there, or are there other things that maybe you think we should be looking to address in the next 5 to 25 years?
I definitely agree with Bruce. I think climate change is definitely a big challenge that we should all worry about and try to find solutions and find potential designs or even like technologies that can help us tackle that wicked problem that is climate change. I also think, for example, in design, in terms of emerging technologies, artificial intelligence is something that it's a challenge, but it's also an opportunity for us to potentially work with that and think about the ethics of AI, think about the potential impacts that AI can have in everyday life, and the potential that AI also has to reduce inequalities. So I think reducing inequalities to promote good health, well-being, and tackle wicked issues such as global climate change is really important.
Yeah, totally agree there. Thank you so much, Carla. And Christine, I wondered if you could add as well to how, you know, innovation and entrepreneurship can help, obviously, small and medium-sized businesses to address those concerns as well?
Yeah, I think alongside, you know, issues around climate change and well-being, you know, there's those issues around poverty and inequality that we're facing as well. And so for me, one of the exciting areas of entrepreneurship, yes, there are things that small and medium-sized businesses are doing, but sitting alongside that has been the growth of social entrepreneurship. And so what we're talking about with social entrepreneurship are entrepreneurs looking for opportunities for social change. So again, it can relate to the innovations that Bruce was talking about. Carla, your work around disability, designing for around disability. So I think one of the great things about working with students over the last kind of 10 to 15 years has been this emergence around this drive that for a lot of you as young people for social change, for addressing inequality, for addressing poverty, and that social entrepreneurship can provide an avenue for doing that. So it's really exciting.
Yeah, I completely agree there as well, Christine. And that actually leads us quite well into our next question, which is essentially, you know, what role do we think, or you know, should universities play in addressing some of these massive challenges you've all highlighted there? So I'll go straight to you, Bruce, again, if that's okay. You know, how do you think universities, you know, what role can they play in addressing, you know, climate change? And yeah.
Thanks, Ryan. That's a really good question. I think universities have multiple roles. A lot of it's about people and capability. And so one of the roles is to train, you know, the students who go through the university to understand those issues that we've just talked about really well, and to be able to then go and work in, you know, for companies in the world and governments in the world to make those things better and to solve those issues. So there's a role for the training, but it has to be training the right kinds of things so that people have a really clear understanding of what's happening. And then secondly, universities have a role to provide expertise directly. So if people want some technical expertise or some design expertise or business expertise, they can go to experts at the university and get direct assistance to do whatever it is they want to do. And then, of course, universities also have a role as a conscience of society to try and, you know, highlight those things, to talk in the media, to give public talks, to talk about what they're doing, and that strong understanding of what's happening in the world, so
Yeah,
that people can be informed.
Yeah, that's fantastic. And I suppose, you know, we're doing that to train, obviously, students and highlight those big issues in society. But, you know, as part of being, you know, the #1 university in New Zealand, but also being so globally connected, I guess it allows us also to share our expertise where, you know, some of those really, really important things related to climate change, you know, we can help our partners overseas as well.
Absolutely, yeah.
Yeah. And Carla, just going to you, you know, from your perspective, you know, how do you think, or, you know, how should universities be addressing some of these challenges we've just highlighted?
Sure. I think I agree with everything that Bruce just said. And I think in addition to that, the University of Auckland has a lot of resources available for students to experiment and test new ideas. And it's a space for learning, but also for creativity. It's a space for tackling big challenges. And what's unique about the University of Auckland is that we can look at local practices. So we can think about indigenous knowledges, we can think about what's unique to New Zealand, we can learn from this, and then we can take that to the rest of the world. So it's really important, I think, for universities to think about micro and local solutions, and then the macro and global challenges as well. So we do need to sometimes look at the small and baby steps that we can take along the way before we go into actually solving huge global problems. And I think that's really unique to the University of Auckland.
Totally agree. Yeah, sometimes those really small changes can have a massive impact. So completely agree. And they're really practical, and things we can actually do now. Christine, over to you in terms of, how do you see universities playing a role in addressing some of these challenges?
Yeah, I just want to pick up on something that Carla mentioned earlier, and also what Bruce was talking about, this idea of thinking and questioning critically, and being the university being the conscience of society. So sometimes we think innovation and entrepreneurship equals good. Well, it doesn't always equal good. Social entrepreneurship may not always be good. Entrepreneurship and innovation of itself does not necessarily equal good. So what we're doing at the university, and I really like Carla's reference to sitting at what happens across our university, is so that we can help you be able to critically think about what innovation or what entrepreneurship is happening, so that then there is some questioning about this, there is an understanding around the ethics of what's happening, as well as the impact around equality and poverty and climate change. So I think that's really, really important. We have a really important role to play in that.
I completely agree. I think that's absolutely spot on. Now I'm just going to move on to the next question. And Bruce, this is predominantly for yourself. When we do look at the Sustainable Development Goals, and in particular Sustainable Development Goal number 8, it's really looking at decent work and economic growth, which is one of the targets, and it's essentially to improve progressively through to 2030 global resource efficiency in consumption and production, and endeavor to decouple economic growth from environmental degradation. Because, the more we grow, all companies want to make a profit and grow, but how does that affect the environment? And that goes hand in hand with what everyone was talking about in relation to climate change and helping to address some of those challenges. So I'm just wondering, based on some of the research that you've done, Bruce, as well, how can robotics and automation help to achieve this goal? How can we efficiently consume production and endeavor to decouple economic growth from environmental degradation?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. That's a good question. Well, for me, robotics and automation are all about improving productivity. So generally, you only automate something if you want to make it better, and usually, by making it more productive. So I think robotics can help create, help us do the things we need to do more quickly and more robustly than maybe we're doing it at the moment. And that decoupling the economic growth from environmental degradation means that we should be creating the technology that will help with both of those things. So that will be more productive, and the technology will improve the environment. So, robots to pick up rubbish or clean the oceans or whatever it is that you want to do, and certainly that will do the tasks you want to do in factories without creating the environmental problems that we're creating by doing it manually.
Yeah.
So I think we can do that if we just sit down in each case and design the technology for it.
Yeah, I think that's great. And I have heard about some of those robots that are being developed about clearing up the ocean and clearing up plastic, particularly in certain cities which really struggle with pollution and waste. So that's really, really fascinating. Just moving on to the next question for you, Bruce. And again, this probably does definitely relate to some of the research that you are conducting. It's essentially looking at, current trends in population aging are particularly relevant for some of the Sustainable Development Goals in relation to eradicating poverty and ensuring healthy lives and well-being at all ages, promoting gender equality and decent work for all. How is your work in relation to, say, health robotics, for example, helping to address some of those challenges facing countries, particularly in the West and arguably in the Northern Hemisphere, and even in New Zealand from an aging population?
Yeah, thanks, Ryan. Also, there was a question about this, so I'll try to answer that at the same time.
Okay, yeah.
So just to be clear, our robots are not designed to replace humans, because there'll always be the need for the human side of healthcare. What the robots are doing, and when we work with the humans who are doing the healthcare, so that they can tell us what is it that you would like us to take off your hands so that the technology can do it for you. And one of those things is repetitive, simple repetitive tasks, like reminding older people to take their medication, for example, because we know that's a challenge, or reminding people to use their inhaler if they have respiratory problems, or do their breathing exercises. So things that, you know, a human would have to maybe for district nursing care would have to get in the car, drive around to the patient's place, knock on the door, say, you know, how are you going and how's your medication doing? And so that's a very expensive, resource intense process. And so that's something that a robot can do easily, and can also report back by sending the data back through the internet to a server, so that the human care worker can see that, oh, everybody's taken their medication, that's all fine. This one person hasn't taken their medication for the last 2 days, so I will go around and see them because this needs a human intervention. So we think the robots have a job to help with those things. There's other things too, like, you know, moving things around in hospitals, just transporting from one place to another. You'd be amazed at how much logistic transport there is inside a hospital. In some hospitals, it takes up a whole bank of elevators for half a day just to take everything from the storage room to the ward or to whichever office it's needed. So robots can do that sort of stuff. Maybe take the laundry, maybe deliver the milk to the staff room. There's a whole host of things that could be done. So we think robots have a role, and they can help people's healthcare and also record what's happening, vital signs and people's state of mind by analysing the interaction, so that the humans can decide where to put the human effort.
That's fascinating. And yeah, I like the sound of a robot being able to do your laundry. That sounds something that we can also use elsewhere as well. So just moving on now to Carla, I have a couple of questions for you. So New Zealand is currently positioned as one of the best locations in the world in relation to educating for the future. And why do you think this is? And would you be able to talk a little bit about how design plays into this?
Sure. Thanks for the question. I think it's because when we think about the future, we think about it with excitement here, right? Like the future is not scary for us. And one of the things sometimes we talk about in design is that current people studying design, by the time they graduate, 65% of these people will be working at jobs that don't exist at the moment. And a lot of people think, oh, okay, so then how can we teach design if we don't know the kinds of jobs that will be available in the future? And that's exciting, because that means we can focus on developing skills that can be applied to any context and any scenario. And I think 2020 with COVID, it's the perfect example that sometimes we try to plan for the future and sometimes we think we have things under control, but things change. So I think New Zealand is positioned, especially the University of Auckland, is a good place to study, because here we think about resilience and we think about being prepared for change, and we think about looking at the future in a way that we're trying to find opportunities and we're trying to find ways that we can all be future proof and that we can all be prepared for whatever the future is going to look like. And in design, it's something that we talk about at the moment. We do a lot of speculative work. So we try to think about what's going to happen in 10 years time, in 20 years time, and how can we make sure we are prepared for this.
No, I think that's fascinating. I guess a lot of that also aligns quite nicely with Christine's work in innovation and entrepreneurship, in, you know, really helping to be future-proof. I mean, who would have thought that would be in a pandemic in 2020? I'm sure, you know, a lot of businesses, a lot of companies, organizations, and even our daily lives try to being, you know, future-proof from something like this happening again is definitely something we want to work towards.
Definitely, and something that we that I'm noticing from what Bruce and Christine are saying as well is that we are all working in transdisciplinary areas, and we're all trying to break silos, disciplinary silos, and all the work that we have been talking about and the examples we've been giving involve engineering, design, innovation, and entrepreneurship. So yeah, that's what is exciting about education for the future at the University of Auckland, because we're trying to break silos and be transdisciplinary.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, Carla, as well. And I think what's great about the university, and I guess Christine might touch on this later on, is that's why it's so great. We've got programs like Velocity and the Unleash space, really bringing students from sort of all areas and staff really to come together and really help tackle some of those issues and explore some of those opportunities, as you said. Now, Carla, I'm just going to move on to your next question. Mm-hmm. Which is really considering a health and well-being perspective, how can teaching and research in the field of design help address some of the challenges we're facing in today's world?
Yes, thanks for the question. And then I also see that in the Q&A window, there's a question related to that. So I guess I'll be answering both questions.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So design in terms of health and well-being, design for health and well-being, it's kind of an area that it's really interesting, and it's the area that I'm particular, that's kind of the area that I try to practice in, because I'll give two examples of how design can be applied to health and well-being. So one of the research projects that I know really well, it's from our head of design, Associate Professor Deb Paulson, and she has developed this VR goggle game for young people that have to go to hospital for long-term treatment. So by talking to parents of children that go to hospital, Deb was able to identify that a lot of children feel very lonely when they're in hospital because they have to be removed from their communities or from their schools, and they are sitting in this room by themselves. So this VR technology and the game that she has created, it's actually an opportunity for kids to play with each other while they're in hospital. So basically, once they have the VR goggle on, what happens is they see their hospital bed transforming into a boat, and they see the room filling up with water. And then they start to see other boats on the horizon, which are the other children that are in that same hospital. And basically, they can communicate through this virtual environment, this immersive virtual world, where they, out of sudden, they're not alone anymore, and they're not in a hospital. And that's really interesting. And that's really cool, because that's how technology can also help with the overall well-being, not only the physical well-being, but also the mental health and spiritual health, and all aspects involving health and well-being. But also, design can think about changing some of the processes and procedures that happen in a hospital that don't necessarily involve new technology. So just by changing some of the steps in the journey or in the experience of patients in hospital, diagnose time can be reduced. The quality of the work environment for nurses and doctors can be improved. So it's also, we try to look into systematic approaches, and also think about all the stakeholders involved in the context that we're working with, and try to make sure everyone benefits from it. So it's not only about the end user. So we use that word a lot in design. So it's not only about the patient or the end user, it's also about the healthcare workers and the carers, the families, and everyone involved in that context.
Oh, that's absolutely wonderful. And that's so nice for those children who, as you said, highlighting that particular case, that must be so daunting for someone, on their own in hospital, just as an adult, let alone being a child as well. And so that VR sounds absolutely wonderful.
Yeah, it's a wonderful project that my colleague and Associate Professor Deb Paulson has worked on. And every time she tells this story, people kind of start getting a little bit more about what we can do in design and its relationships to health and well-being.
I'll have to drop by at some point and try on the VR goggles as well. That would be wonderful. Thank you. Okay, well, thank you so much, Carla. So I'm just now going to move on to questions for Christine. So Chris, you've been involved in entrepreneurship and education for many, many years, and you were instrumental in the establishment of. Sorry, I've gone onto the wrong question. My apologies. Let me just go back. So, looking at the Sustainable Development Goal, which is Target 8.3, it talks about the promotion and development orientated policies that support productive activities, entrepreneurship, innovation, the growth of micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. Now, based on your research and work with SMEs and family businesses and social enterprises, as you've mentioned previously in New Zealand, what are the key challenges we face in achieving this target, such as SDG target 8.3?
Yeah, so this challenge of I guess, growing businesses and growing businesses in New Zealand. And I think one of the challenges is that for these owner-managed businesses, which is the situation with micro, small and medium-sized businesses, is that they often mistake motion for progress. So what do I mean by that? So that's that idea of, kind of we're going really fast, but actually we're not really getting anywhere. And so a challenge is, what do we say no to? What do these owner managers, what do these entrepreneurs say no to? Because they often have 101 different ideas, but not all ideas are viable opportunities. And then you've got to sustainably grow the business. So I guess part of what we're doing, and I know the work that Carla's doing as well, is to enable, to provide tools and frameworks to help these businesses say no to things, so that they're then saying yes to the right things. So I think that challenge of working smart, not necessarily working hard. And I hope that makes sense. And for those of you watching who have parents who are, own or run small or medium-sized businesses, have family businesses, indeed you might be working in small or medium-sized businesses, you kind of know what I'm talking about. It's this real challenge of mistaking motion for progress.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. And that actually reminds me of a story. It's called Who Moved My Cheese?
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I totally agree. I have parents as well who started small businesses, and that's definitely very, very crucial. So just looking at the next question, which you'll have to forgive me, I was straight in there on this question. Yeah. So you've been involved in entrepreneurship and education for many, many years, and you were instrumental in the establishment of Velocity, which is something we discussed at the beginning. Yeah. And what's great is, I'm sure you'll talk about that soon, about, how lots of students can be part of that program, but how important is that program in sort of sparking that entrepreneurial spirit and mindset amongst our students and even some of our staff?
Yeah, it's a good point around students and staff, and that's been one of the I think one of the successes of Velocity. And I think many students come already with an entrepreneurial mindset. So I think there was a question around, well, what can I do at the University of Auckland if I've got a business idea? Can I spend time at the university? Will people help me? And this is exactly where Velocity comes in. So because it's open to all students and all staff across the university, it means that there's various different events, there's various different challenges where you can take your idea and you can explore that idea and see if it is a viable opportunity. And you get feedback from people who are experienced business people, experienced academics working in this space, angel investors, venture capital, so that they can help you kind of take that idea. And sometimes the idea is just not viable. But that means if you say no to that idea, there'll be a number of other ideas that you can then spend time on and look to see if they're viable opportunities. I think the other thing, and Bruce talked about kind of commercialization experts. So what we have is some amazing research, like Bruce's research, across the university. So Velocity offers an opportunity for students and staff working together to then look at what the commercial opportunities are. And we've had some amazing successes from great research that's been occurring in our university and saying, now, what is the commercial potential of that, and who in our ecosystem can come together to help that? And Velocity's been a really important part of that story.
Oh, that's amazing. And Christine, I wondered if it would be possible to maybe, I don't know if you've got any examples, as you said there, just to highlight, one of those fantastic examples.
So, a number of years ago, there is a company called Power by Proxy, and it's, excuse me, I am not an engineer, but my really basic understanding is it takes power from here to there, but there's no cord in between.
Inductive power transfer.
Thank you. That's a much better way of talking about it. So, an amazing professor in that area built up, kind of research capability, and then different other academics working, and then young engineering students coming through. And that's been, built and grown and been a really, really successful business. And that's just one of many. So again, coming back to the points that were raised earlier, we can bring this business know-how and combine that, whether it's in science, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in robotics, whether it's in other aspects of engineering, whether it's in arts, music, dance, whatever it is. And it's the both and. It's bringing those things together. So it's great. And it's really exciting. It makes you really proud to work at the university, I guess.
Yeah, I totally agree. And every time I've gone past seen some of the Velocity events or seen some of the Unleash Space events, it really does look fascinating. And I think it's such a wonderful opportunity for students, and as you said, staff as well, to really explore those ideas. Now, I guess that leads us on really to our last question, and then we will go to some of the questions that have been sent to us by our attendees today. And that's really just looking at, we've talked a lot about, climate change and innovation for small and medium-sized businesses, as well as design. And I guess some of the concerns that people have in society is with change, some people can lose out. And in this case, if we are utilizing technology and automation in, for example, Bruce, in terms of fruit picking or in factories like companies like Ocado, for example, in the UK, will that lead to the loss of the jobs? And if so, what will be the jobs of the future? And Carla, I think you said in the beginning, you'll have to repeat that. It was 65% of students, those jobs are not yet developed yet. They're not actually there, which is quite scary, but also very exciting, as you highlighted. So we'll start with Bruce, if maybe you can just talk about, what would be the jobs of the future, and are robots taking our jobs?
Thanks, Ryan. Actually, I do not think robots will take all our jobs away. And there's very little evidence to support that idea. Most of the more detailed analyses have come up with a different conclusion. And I don't know whether people can see the chat, but I can post a link to a video that you should watch. Actually, it's a video on a website called Free Think. It says, "Will robots take our jobs?" And the conclusion is that they won't.
Oh, that's good. As long as they don't take over as well.
Well, that's there's not much evidence for that either.
Oh, good.
Posted the link in the chat. That's what you see on the videos and the movies. That's what people worry about. I think the jobs that will be created there'll be a lot of tech jobs, because people have to create those robots. They have to program the robots, and often there's a lot of work to set a robot up in a new task. So the commissioning of the robot, if you like, programming it to do the new task, connecting all the sensors, and then making sure it does the task properly and refining it. At the moment, there's a lot of work for machine learning experts to train a robot to understand the objects that it needs to develop, and so on.
Brilliant. I suppose that machine learning would probably fall into, would you say, software engineering and maybe data science?
Yeah, it does. We think it's all part of robotics, but it does.
And robotics,
It is also used in those areas. And a lot of people call it AI, even though it's not really AI.
Yeah.
And there'll be jobs also to make the robot, bolt the bits together, make
Yep.
the parts, to do the machinery and the welding, painting. So there's a lot of construction work, and there'll be jobs maintaining those robots. Like
Yep.
if you have robots in a meat processing plant, you'll need, instead of the electrician, you'll need the robot engineer to make sure all of that stuff is working properly and up to, the performance that it should be.
And I suppose, touching on that, Bruce, that's why the university has developed a master's in robotics and automation, which will be available to students in 2021 and 2022. So that's definitely something to check out for all of our attendees, if that is something of interest, to definitely go onto our website and check that out. So just leading on from you, Bruce, Carla, I wonder if you could just touch on this question as well.
Yes, sure. And my perspective about automation and technology is that if automation and robots are going to take some of the repetitive jobs and will reduce some of that workload for humans, then that is an opportunity for us to focus on jobs and work where we can align what we care about with what we do. I think we're transitioning from a scenario where people have jobs because they need to pay rent, they need to buy food, and they need to support a family, to, I think, the future jobs, and I can't tell you exactly what the future of jobs is going to be like, but what I imagine, because of the opportunities that technology and automation present, is that we'll be able to merge our interests and our passions with our work. Because if we can get the robots to do the work that we don't want to do, then we can actually focus on things like, if you are passionate about making a change for climate change, if you want to tackle that problem, you can actually try to combine that with what you're going to be doing 40 hours a week as your full-time job. So I think, to me, automation is not scary at all, because to me, automation is an opportunity to focus on purposeful and rewarding work in the future.
No, that sounds fantastic, and I totally agree. Back in the day, I worked in a ceramics factory, actually. So if there was a robot doing that and I was concentrating on something else, I'm sure I'd much rather do that. So completely appreciate that. And Chris,
interrupt. I was just going to say very quickly that in design, there's also all the creative component of jobs as well, which is very particular to human beings as well. So it's something to consider. And our Masters of Design is actually structured in a way that students can actually bring their personal interests into the university, and we can support them in developing those interests. So the whole structure, both coursework masters and research masters, is planned in a way for students to get mentorship and to get support and resources to work on their areas of interest.
No, that's perfect. Christine, I wondered if you could add to the discussion here as well.
Well, actually, I don't think I will be adding to it, because, as you quite rightly pointed out, I've been working for many, many years, and I actually think it's those people that are watching us, as the people coming to our universities who have great ideas. You're going to be the ones that are going to be thinking up the opportunities, the social enterprises, the things that'll impact climate change, the business opportunities. You'll be creating the jobs, and we'll just be there to hopefully help guide and provide frameworks and different ways of thinking and challenging you. But you're going to be the ones that are going to be doing it.
No pressure.
No, but what an amazing opportunity. I think that's
totally.
One of the things I really enjoy about these conversations is I find out, a lot more about what our university is doing. And I think what comes through from that is opportunities, amazing opportunities.
Totally agree. So we're just going to move. I'm conscious of time, and I realise we have gone slightly over time. So I believe our panelists today, you have been great in answering some of those questions as we have gone along. But what I would just like to do is, before we do wrap up, just for anyone to ask any final questions in the chat box function, and we'll do our best to answer those. I'm just looking at some of the questions now. So, how can older generations adapt to the job and scenario change? So some of these questions, I believe we have answered in one way. I just see a question that's come in here. I believe that problems in automation of jobs is that older generations have had only known that type of job. So it's a good point. So we're talking about jobs of the future, essentially. And I guess Raul here is essentially saying, well, if these new jobs are coming, how are we going to help train those people? And I suppose that really falls into, what role can universities play in obviously helping to train people to adapt to change, as Carla, as Bruce, and as Christine has said. But I don't know if Bruce or Carla or Christine, if there's anything you'd like to add there. Yeah, go on, Bruce.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question, because while overall, when automation happens, normally more jobs are created and there's more people employed in the world today than there ever were at any time in history. There are those people that are doing a job that have been doing it for a long time who can be displaced for a while. So we need that retraining program. We have to take it seriously. It's part of what goes back to what Christine said about, equity and poverty. We need to make sure that we maintain good potential for all of those people to have good jobs. So, the Masters in Robotics, for example, is also not just about training young people. It's about retraining people who are already in some kind of job and they want to upskill. And I think governments should fund that kind of retraining, and companies should support it and, help their workers take that new step. Because really, it's the people that you want to keep, and if you can retrain them, you can retain their commitment to the company.
Yeah, I agree. And I guess, Christina, with the current situation and pandemic, and it's really forcing companies to adapt and change extremely quickly, and governments across the world are really struggling with lockdowns and obviously economies shrinking and GDP shrinking and obviously recessions happening. So what role do you think governments and businesses should play, just addressing some of the points that Bruce there made in relation to retraining?
I mean, I would love to see that support coming through from the government, and I say government because that's obviously it's taxpayers' money, and taxpayers, we as a community, in terms of supporting others in that community. And I think one of the things is this idea of lifelong learning, and I know it's a very easy phrase, it trips off the tongue, but it is something that we do have to think about, that we are going to all constantly, and obviously we work at a university, we love learning, that's why we're there. So we need to be supporting and changing the headspace and the learning kind of focus for even for new graduates. You've completed a bachelor's degree, but then what are the opportunities with the master's programs that Carla and Bruce have talked about? And so I think it is incredibly important that we as a community encourage our governments to support that kind of retraining, upskilling, training in new areas.
Yeah, and I guess it's an investment as well. I mean, which should hopefully, pay off.
It's not a cost.
Yeah,
it's not a cost.
Totally agree. Carla, I'm going to just move on to another question which has just come in, and I think this would be a great one for you to answer. And that's from one of our attendees today, who's really just said they obviously work with high school students, and essentially before high school students come to university, they're wondering, are there any particular subjects or any soft skills students should look to work at before they come to university? And I wondered if you had anything to add to that, Carla.
Yes, definitely. I think that high schools prepare students really well in terms of learning how to work in groups and working with each other. And I think some of the soft skills that are really important in a university environment are communication, collaboration, and also I think it's important for people to know about themselves and their areas of interest. So a lot of the work we do locally with high schools is that we go out to schools and we ask students, what are the things that you care about? What are the technologies that excite you? What are the global challenges that worry you? So I think once high school students kind of understand the things that they like, they care about, they can definitely look at universities and try to find a course that is going to support that. So we say in design, for example, if you like to play video games, come study design, because we actually think that some of the skills and some of the hobbies and some of the things that young people like to do can actually be developed and turned into a career. And so those are the things I think are really important. Knowing a lot about who you are, what you want to do, what you care about, but also learning how to work with others, learning how to collaborate, and learn how to not basically try to be excited about the future and motivated about the potential changes that you can make.
That's perfect. So I'm just conscious of time, so I am going to try and wrap up today's session. But just one thing to add as well to your points there, Carla, and I think that's totally spot on in terms of developing and helping students really select that subject area that they're going to pursue for the next 3 to 4 years. You would hate to get it wrong. So I totally agree in pursuing things that you enjoy and you're interested in. But I guess the other great thing about coming to university is the fact that we will help students develop those soft skills that they might be lacking. And that will be in addition to obviously the programs that they do choose to study. And I think that's one of the great things about the University of Auckland, you know, things such as Velocity, Unleash, but also the student support and development teams that we do have. They do play a massive role in helping our students with their soft skills as well. Okay, well, I think for us today, we're going to finish there, but I do just want to say a massive thank you to everybody who's joined us from throughout the world. We really appreciate you taking the time to stick with us, and I do apologize that we have gone over. If you do want to find out more information about the University of Auckland, we are on social media, and again, we have our Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and we do also have a page on sustainability, which I highly implore you to go and check out as well, so you can see what we're doing at the university and some of the amazing research we're doing to address some of those key sustainable development goals. So please do go and have a look. I also just want to highlight that we do have exemplar panelists, lecturers and professors from all of these fantastic faculties such as engineering, School of Design and the Graduate School of Management. So please do check out these VR codes, and we will send you links after today so you can look at the specific programs available in these areas. But apart from that, I do just want to take a moment just to thank our panelists, Carla, Bruce, and Christine. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. And I'm sure you're looking forward to seeing, hopefully, some of our attendees who will be joining us at the university at some point in the near future. But thank you so much to everyone. And again, all the best. Take care. Keep well, stay safe. And we look forward to hopefully seeing you in Aotearoa in Auckland very, very soon. Thank you so much, everybody. Take care.